Imagine walking into a boardroom. You project an AI-generated financial model onto the screen. It looks flawless. The revenue projections line up, the valuation outputs are perfectly formatted, and the executive summary reads cleanly. But look at the underlying logic. In this example, a baseline revenue growth row has an incorrect formula, and the model simply drags that same broken formula across every future year. The error compounds, bloating the final valuation to a number that has no basis in reality. You won't catch it during a quick review because Excel doesn't flag it. There is no #ref error, no warning pop-up, and no broken cell. To the software, the math is functional. It's just the logic that's wrong. Generative AI makes it easy to produce financial models in costumes. You get the right layout and the correct labels, but the document lacks the mathematical foundation required for a high-stakes decision. The failure usually starts at the prompt. A user takes a messy folder of historical actuals, transcripts, and assumptions and shoves it all into a single request for a finished file. Large language models are relentlessly goal-oriented. If you ask for a final presentation deck, the model focuses on delivering that specific artifact, often treating source discipline and factual accuracy as secondary to finishing the task. Because the software is trying to satisfy your request for a complete document, it will often bridge gaps in your data by hallucinating connections or blending disparate datasets into a single confident answer. Treating AI as a single prompt shortcut doesn't just create errors, it produces work that looks credible but collapses under scrutiny, turning a fast process into a reputational liability. Fixing this requires a shift in mindset. You have to move past the simple prompt and build a rigid 4-stage workflow pipeline that ensures the output can actually be trusted. Stage 1 is source prep. Before you ask for a single slide or cell, you instruct the AI to review everything in your folder, then inventory and label every document with dates, owners, and data status. Stage 2 is structure. You mandate the AI to use only that organized inventory to generate a strict file specification, the blueprint for the final file. For a presentation, this blueprint is a narrative spine. It maps specific claims directly to specific source IDs, proving exactly where every argument comes from before the visual design even begins. For a spreadsheet, the blueprint is a tab architecture. You isolate the raw data in its own layer, place the calculation logic in the middle, and keep the final output views strictly separated at the top. If the initial blueprint does not explicitly define where the truth lives, the finished file won't be able to defend it either. Stage 3 is constrained creation. Now you have the AI build the artifact, but it is strictly bound by the blueprint you just made. It is no longer allowed to freestyle new data. For presentations, you split the work into 2 passes. First, you have the model generate the text claims and the evidence trail, entirely devoid of any visual design, charts, or formatting. This split keeps visual polish from hiding a weak argument. You ensure the logic is sound before it becomes beautiful and more difficult to edit. You use a similar layered approach for spreadsheets. You load the raw data, build the assumption logic, and only then produce the final visual output. A model whose formulas cannot be inspected isn't ready for a decision. It must be able to show that if you change an assumption, the output changes for the right reason. The final stage is the most important, subjecting the finished document to a hostile verification audit. To do this, you use a secondary AI model. You explicitly instruct this second model to act as a skeptical, hostile reviewer that suspects every claim and every number in the file. You give the hostile AI a specific task: identify claims without source attribution, charts with untraceable data, and formulas inconsistent across columns. The prompt must specify that the hostile AI only enumerates the errors in a written list. By separating the job of finding problems from the job of fixing them, you get a much more rigorous review. You feed that list back to the original model for corrections and repeat the process. This creates a self-correcting loop that catches contradictions before a human ever has to open the file. This kind of multi-agent auditing allows you to scale quality assurance far beyond what is possible with manual proofreading alone, especially as the volume of your work increases. This process involves several steps, so why hasn't a major tech provider simply automated this entire 4-stage pipeline into a single easy button? The challenge is that reality has a surprising amount of detail. Every boardroom deck and financial model rests on specific context and unique assumptions that a one-size-fits-all template often misses. To ensure the output is reliable, the professional still has to define the architecture that connects the specific data to the final claim. It requires being deep enough in the context to custom assemble the information. True mastery of these tools requires professionals to build their own bespoke systems and architectures, rather than relying on generalized defaults. The person relying on generic prompts produces one beautiful, indefensible document that risks losing the trust of their leadership. But by implementing a rigorous workflow, you can move past building individual assets. You can simultaneously draft 8 to 10 highly reliable, complex documents at once. Your role changes. You spend less time on manual generation and more time acting as the final executive judge of strategic value. While AI can scale the speed of your production, the ultimate responsibility for the foundational truth remains strictly human. That is what serious knowledge work looks like in 2026.